Well, good morning. You may or may not know that this Sunday, today, in the Orthodox calendar is Easter Day. And so this morning when I arrived and saw Arthur, I said, Christos Anesti. And Arthur, you said? I won't dare to try and repeat that, but it means truly Christ is risen. Christ is risen. And if you're talking with someone with a Greek background in particular, you should say, today's Easter Day, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Before I start, last week I had a bunch of these books to give away, and I still have more. I think I have 5 or 6 left. The title is Easter Unbelievable? It's a very skinny book. Last Sunday I had not yet read the book. I have now read the book. It answers 4 questions quite snappily. Did Jesus really live in history? Is it fair for one person to die for another? How can a rational person believe that Jesus rose from the dead? And does anyone genuinely want to live forever? And all in the space of about 60 pages. I have 6 to give away. If you think this would be a helpful thing for you to read through, or especially if there's someone else that you would love to give this to and encourage them to read it, please, they're not doing anyone any good sitting on my shelf. I'd love to give that away a little later. Now, here we go. Our question is truth whatever you make it? It's such an appealing idea. The idea, which once upon a time was so novel and is now so widely accepted and applauded, is this, that in the end, truth is whatever you make it. It's whatever you choose. It's whatever you create. You get to be a truth creator. It's an appealing idea. And it's rife in our world. Why is this idea so appealing? Well, think about it. It's not too hard to answer. If the truth is malleable, if truth can be shaped however I please, if truth is whatever I choose to make it, then no one can ever be wrong. And that goes all the way from if you decide that a double choc ice cream is best, while I decide, no, the best ice cream choice possible is vanilla and cheese. Well, who's to say that you're wrong and I'm right? By the way, I understand that was a taste sensation at least once. Someone I knew tasted vanilla and cheese, chunks of cheese in vanilla ice cream, somewhere back in the 1980s. It goes all the way from there to, and this then becomes intensely serious, if you are convinced that there is an infinite spectrum of gender identities, while I stick to the more historic concept of binary gender tied to biological sex, on what basis could anyone possibly decide that you're right and I'm wrong? There is no way of saying who's right and who's wrong if truth is whatever you make it. And so do you see it? If truth is whatever I make it, it's so appealing. No one can ever be wrong, and I can live however it pleases me. I can live however I choose. I can live as I see fit. And ethics becomes entirely a matter of taste. Ethics we don't care anymore about virtue or divine design or categorical imperatives or natural law. Ethics just becomes a matter of taste. And if ethics is just a matter of taste, well, in that case, there is no need for me ever to test my own heart and my motives, and my own conscience is totally off the hook. I really can live as I please, even if I have a tender conscience. It means that none of us needs to feel as though I'm constrained to living in a straitjacket which has been designed and fabricated by someone else. No, I'm free to express the truth however I choose. It's so appealing. there are other bonuses in principle. If truth is whatever I choose it to be, then instantly, in principle, all the hard work, of qualifying with a medical degree or an aeronautical engineering degree very quickly becomes unnecessary. What does it matter if the surgeon hasn't trained? Because truth is whatever we make it. What does it matter if the aeroplane was built from a child's unmathematical sketch? It doesn't matter. We'll come back to this. The reason we're exploring this question this morning and then 4 others over the next 4 Sundays, it's a way of introducing the Life series, which we are running again in May and June with our local sister Anglican churches. And I want you thinking and praying now, should you be there? I want you thinking and praying now, whom else that God has given you to love, whom else could you invite along? The heart of week 1, which we'll be running on Wednesday, the 17th of May, is how can we know what it is that makes the good life good? That's what week 1 is all about. But underlying that is this more fundamental question, isn't truth whatever you make it? Isn't truth whatever you make it? Now, to tease this out just a little further, some of us have seen this before. I have a short clip of some American uni students teasing out some of the implications of this concept. So let's watch together.
So if I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you. Okay. Yeah.
Nice to meet you. I'd be like, what? Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
I'd ask you how you came to that conclusion.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Yeah, be who you are.
I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
If you feel 7 at heart, then then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5".
If you truly believed you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
You. Sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
Yes.
Yeah, that the truth is whatever you make it becomes so appealing. At one level, I can see there are huge cultural shifts even in my own lifetime. And I have a bunch of examples here. In the dim, dark ages when I was a teen, there was essentially one popular music playlist in any one given week. There was one playlist. There was even a TV show in colour each Sunday evening, Countdown, shaping the tastes of a generation. Whereas now, of course, there's popular and there's even more popular music, but in principle, there are infinite playlists. There's certainly not just one. And so if your tastes are more jazz funk or medieval Gregorian chant or whatever it is, well, go right ahead and create your own playlist. Example 1. Example 2, dancing. Once upon a time, learning to dance meant everyone learning the same steps, or everyone learning the same counterpart, male and female steps, such that dancing was essentially a very carefully coordinated, choreographed, communal activity, normally with live music. And it was the kind of thing that all ages could enjoy together because everyone knew the steps. That's exactly my own memory of those very first, for the boys especially, very, very uncomfortable dance lessons in primary school. Dancing was a deeply social, carefully coordinated activity together. Whereas now, so much dancing it's all about doing your own thing. Very rarely with live music. I remember encountering this first at age 18 when I'd recently moved to Australia. And I remember thinking, whatever is going on here and how does this work? I just don't get it. I don't get it at all. And so the cultural shift is, rather than dancing with others, it's almost now as though we dance at others. And dancing reflects my own individuality. Popular music, dancing. Next example, careers counselling. A few years back, I remember being quizzed. Dad, when you were back in high school, weren't you told that what you need to do is figure out what it is that you are most passionate about, most enthusiastic about? What is it that feeds your spirit, and then base all your career decisions and your training decisions on that? Isn't that what you were told? Because that's what we're being told. And my answer was, well, no. Back when I was in high school, no one ever even thought of that. My interests were not irrelevant, but those who were giving careers counselling, like careers advice, those who were guiding me cared mostly about my aptitudes and my capacities, never my passions. That never even occurred to them. What's more, they knew the human heart can be so deceptive. The human heart is not a good guide. The human heart is corrupt. And in particular, the human heart is a very poor guide into the job market. Because otherwise we'd have 50 people all wanting to become music therapists and no one wanting to become a garbage collector. I tell you which society I'd rather live in with 50, do you want 50 music therapists or 50 garbage collectors? I know which is more healthy. There are stacks more examples. We could explore shifts in schooling. Once upon a time, school was a place where you were formed by being informed. Whereas now school is more of a place where you're formed by performing. There are shifts in schooling. There are shifts in attitudes to abortion. Is an embryo a person with potential or just a potential person? There are shifts in attitudes to modesty. I had a recent conversation with Julie when I realised, to my horror, I had not even noticed this, that the word modesty seems to have vanished from our vocabs. Shifts in attitudes to schooling, abortion, modesty, shifts in expectations of marriage. What is marriage? What is marriage for? How long is marriage expected to last? Shifts in expectations around physical beauty, which deeply impacts every single young woman and those who are not so young as well. There are stacks of examples. All of this, though, is shaped by what we might now label expressive individualism. I first came across this terminology, I think about 8 years ago, and when I heard it, I thought, bingo, that's it. That's the way of that language helps clarify what's going on here in so many different parts of our society. Expressive individualism is the idea is it's the right of every individual to determine truth and to express it, and then the obligation of everyone else to applaud. And the thought in our society now is, isn't this the pathway to the good life? Isn't this our best route? Or at least our best route yet? This delusion now infects all Western cultures, so much so that whether you like it or not, you breathe expressive individualism too. Hence the appeal of, some would say, it's a liberating redefinition of truth. Isn't truth whatever you make it? I would say an insane redefinition. But it seems so appealing. At another level, this is not just a recent development. The deep roots of expressive individualism are now centuries old, and if you go back into 18th and 19th century poetry and philosophy, you can find the roots there. This has taken hundreds of years to develop. The Romantic poets, Wordsworth and Blake, taught us that the most authentic you is what you feel from within. The most authentic you is what you feel from within. That's a lesson from the poets. From the philosophers, and I'm thinking of Rousseau and Nietzsche, they taught us, follow that inner voice. Trust that inner voice. And then, having effectively killed God, which is what Nietzsche claimed we've done, your highest task in life is to follow your inner voice and to create a stylish, transcendent super self, a super version of you, a work of art. You're meant to turn your life into a work of art. And Nietzsche himself said, I am no man, I am dynamite. This has taken hundreds of years to develop, this idea of expressive individualism, which now springs out everywhere in our culture. It turns out that the pressure that comes with basing everything about my life internally is crippling and dangerous. The pressure is crippling and dangerous. We may delude ourselves with the appealing idea that truth is what we make it, but we can only do so for a time. In the end, aeroplanes cannot fly without real physics and real engineering. We don't live in a Roadrunner world where we only fall when we look down and go, oh, look, there's nothing there. In the end, our bodies cannot escape real biology and real medicine. In the end, expressive individualism is crippling and dangerous, and I would say it's also arrogant. In the end, what expressive individualism does is it says each individual gets to play God. And in the end, the pressure and the responsibility of playing God turns out to be terrifying, not liberating. Underneath all of that, there's a theological question. Am I fundamentally a creature, or am I a creator? Now, perhaps the question is slightly too simple, but stick with me just for a moment. Writing about God the Son, the eternal Word made flesh, John the Apostle boldly declares, John 1:3, through him, through Jesus, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. If that's true, well, that includes you. You are fundamentally a creature. You are fundamentally a lovingly designed creature. Now, it's fun to be a creator. And the part of the glory of it is because, as the Bible teaches, we are all designed in God's own image. And this is where the question is slightly too simple. Actually, we are creative creatures, aren't we? We're creative creatures. And as creative creatures, we can produce the magic, the absolute magic of aeroplanes that actually fly. We can produce the magic of songs and symphonies that are deeply moving. We can produce the magic of fun hairstyles and children's artworks and elegant skyscrapers and accurate maps and a beautiful dinner that no one has ever plated before and life-saving surgeries. To be human is incredible. But we're still creatures. We're not creators. In the end, you do not have the power to create yourself. And in the end, you do not have power to create whatever truth happens to suit your own personal taste. Most especially, you do not have power to create truth about God. You can't assign truth to God. All you can do is recognize truth. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship to the Father, has made him known. So am I a creator or a creature? I'm a creature. In fact, a creative creature, but still a creature. As a creature, I have no choice in the end but to conform to real physics and real biology. But even more than that, I have no choice but to conform to him through whom all things were created, in heaven and on earth, and who alone makes God known, or who makes God known as no other can. This idea that truth is whatever you make it, it's whatever you choose, it's whatever you decide to create, it's such an appealing idea because then I get to live as I like. And how can anyone possibly tell me I'm wrong? But in the end, I'm a creature. I do not have power to self-create. You know, I only have a little power even to create my own life story. A whole lot of my life story is totally outside my control. I only have a little power even to create my own life story. I have no authority to create my own morality. And within myself, I'm not like a plastic person able to create and recreate my own personal identity at will. I'm a creature. I'm a lovingly designed creature. And so if I follow those philosophers and attempt to turn my life into a stylish, transcendent work of art, I will be crushed. If I attempt to live as my own self-creator, taking the place of God, I will fail. And so in the end, and despite endless propaganda, and even with all our fabulous technology, this deep myth of expressive individualism cannot lead to the good life. It cannot. So where does this leave us? What do we have to stand on? Paul, our apostle, the uniquely authorised messenger of Christ to the Gentile world, knew very, very deeply that his message sounded incredibly foolish and wimpy in the sophisticated cities of the ancient world. He himself had been schooled with the best. He himself was thoroughly bilingual and bicultural. He had dual citizenships to impress anyone who cared to ask. And he was acutely aware that his central message was outright offensive in the Jewish world. What do you mean you worship someone who died cursed? Cursed by God on a tree. And he was sensitive to the fact that in the wider Greco-Roman world, it just sounded stupid. What kind of God goes and gets himself crucified? It's laughable. And so he knew that wherever he went, to proclaim Christ was to invite mockery. And yet he is so completely convinced that he has no other truth to stand upon, no other truth worth proclaiming, no other truth that can ever save anyone. He knows full well how wimpy and how foolish it makes him look every time he opens his mouth. But listen again. I'm going to read from 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and into chapter 2. Listen again to his unbending, unblushing, single-minded focus. 1 Corinthians 1 verse 18, the message of the cross is foolishness. Interesting side comment here. The word foolishness in Greek is moria, and maybe you can hear, if you know the story, Gandalf. It's foolishness. To head that way under the mountains is foolishness, because Tolkien knew his ancient languages. To the sophisticated perishing of the world, Paul knows this message is foolishness. The message of the cross is foolish. It invites mockery. It's foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. The intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world, including the persuasive myth of expressive individualism? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand miraculous signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. A stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles, but to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. Down to verse 30, Christ Jesus has become for us wisdom from God. And remember, Paul, once upon a time known as Saul, previously believed this message of the cross was utter foolishness. Christ Jesus has become for us wisdom from God. That is our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. Therefore, as it is written, let him who boasts, boast in the Lord. And a word of personal testimony. When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. What kind of God goes and gets himself crucified? Only God the Son, the eternal Word made flesh, humbly emptying himself and giving his life as a ransom for many. Only him. So let's draw all these strings together. There is real appeal in the idea that truth is whatever you make it, whatever you choose, whatever you create. Despite the real appeal, it's not true. The compelling wisdom of our age is not trustworthy. And in fact, the pressure that comes with basing everything about my life on what's going on internally within me turns out to be crushing. In the end, I am not fundamentally a creator. Certainly not a self-creator. I don't have that power. I'm a creature. Sure, a creative creature, but still a creature. But it's not as though we have nothing left to stand on. However it might sound, we who know Christ have powerful news. Sure, it looks foolish. Sure, it looks wimpy. But actually, it's the best news. It's the best of God's own wisdom, his life-giving, life-saving, life-giving, subversive, disruptive wisdom. The message of the cross is both power and wisdom from God. And the message of the cross reframes all other known truths. And so I will simply end with a question. Who do you love who needs to know?